End lust, unowed port I, the morning war within morning arrives quietly, before the noise of the world begins. Before the demands of work and the pull of distraction, there exists a moment of absolute truth. A moment when the mind stands alone with itself. In that stillness, we face the same ancient enemy, desire without discipline, the kind that whispers rather than shouts, the kind that promises pleasure while quietly draining strength, the kind that weakens the will while pretending to satisfy it. This is the battle most people refuse to acknowledge, but we do not turn away from it, because the first victory of the day is not over circumstances, not over other people, and not over the world. The first victory is over ourselves. The Roman emperor and philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Those words are not meant to comfort us. They are meant to awaken us, because if the mind truly belongs to us, then every surrender to impulse is a voluntary act. Every moment of weakness is a moment where we abandon command of our own inner world. And so each morning we return to the same question: who governs this mind today? The silent corruption of desire lust is rarely dramatic. It does not always arrive like a storm. More often it creeps in quietly, a glance, a thought, a fantasy that lingers just a little longer than it should. And slowly, almost invisibly, the mind begins to bend. Energy that should be used for creation becomes scattered. Focus dissolves. Discipline weakens. The spirit becomes restless and agitated. The philosopher Seneca warned about this kind of corruption. Long ago, he who is ruled by passion is not his own master. Look closely at those words. Not his own master. This is the true danger. Lust is not merely about desire. Desire itself is natural. It belongs to the fabric of life. But uncontrolled desire transforms a thinking person into something far more fragile, someone who reacts instead of chooses, someone who is led instead of leading, and a life led by impulses is a life without direction, the discipline of awareness. So the day must begin with awareness. Before the mind rushes into tasks, before we reach for our devices, before we allow the outside world to flood our attention, we must first examine the battlefield within. Because the war against destructive desire is not fought once, it is fought daily, and it begins with observation. The teacher, Epictetus, explained this with brutal clarity. No man is free who is not master of himself. Freedom, then, is not found in doing whatever we want. Freedom is found in refusing to be controlled by what we want. Think about how radical this idea is. The world celebrates indulgence. It tells us that every urge deserves expression, that every craving deserves satisfaction, that discipline is repression and restraint is unnatural. But look carefully at the consequences of this philosophy. Endless distraction, weak. Concentratation. Restless mind that cannot sit still for even a few moments. This is not freedom, this is dependence, and dependence is a quiet form of slavery. We choose a different path. There is another way to live, a harder way, a way that requires constant vigilance over the mind. Each morning, we remind ourselves of a simple truth. Not every thought deserves our attention. Not every impulse deserves our obedience. Not every desire deserves fulfillment. The mind produces many images, many urges, many temptations, but we are not obligated to follow them. We are not the servants of these impulses. We are their judges, and the power to judge, to accept or reject what appears within the mind, is the foundation of inner strength. The cost of weakness. Imagine a person who cannot resist every temptation. Every impulse becomes action. Every craving becomes habit. What kind of life does that create? A scattered life. A life where the mind jumps endlessly from pleasure to pleasure, never building anything meaningful, never cultivating deep strength. A life without direction becomes a life without dignity. The Stoic scholar, William B. Irvine, describes this problem in modern terms. He explains that many people chase pleasure thinking it will bring happiness, yet they become trapped in a cycle of constant dissatisfaction. Because indulgence does not satisfy desire, it multiplies it. The more we feed an impulse, the stronger it becomes, and eventually it begins to rule us. The first act of rebellion. So each morning, we perform a quiet act of rebellion. We refuse to be ruled by impulse. We sit with our thoughts and observe them as they appear. Some will be noble, others will be destructive. But observation creates distance, and distance creates control. We learn to say, "This thought is not worthy of my attention. This urge does not deserve my energy. This desire will not dictate my actions." At first, the mind resists this discipline. It rebels, it demands satisfaction. But every act of resistance strengthens the will. Every refusal sharpens the blade of self-control. The true meaning of strength is often misunderstood. People imagine strength as something physical, muscles, power, dominance over others. But the deepest form of strength is invisible. It is the ability to govern one's own mind, to feel temptation and still choose. Discipline to experience desire and still remain calm, to observe impulse without obeying it. This kind of strength is rare, but it can be cultivated, and it begins with a simple morning decision. Today, we choose mastery. The day will bring many tests, images, temptations, moments when the mind attempts to wander. But we remember something important. Every challenge is also an opportunity to strengthen the will, an opportunity to sharpen awareness, an opportunity to practice mastery over the self. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." If that is true, and experience shows that it is, then guarding the mind becomes the most important task of all. So today we stand watch over our thoughts, not with fear but with discipline, because the person who conquers the inner world no longer fears the outer one. The path we walk together, this journey is not about perfection, it is about progress. There will be moments of weakness, moments when the mind slips, moments when desire momentarily takes control. But each new morning gives us another chance to reclaim command. And slowly, through repeated effort, the mind becomes calmer, stronger, clearer. What once felt like an uncontrollable force becomes something we can observe without disturbance. This is the beginning of true freedom. Not the freedom to indulge every impulse, but the freedom to choose who we become. And the first step on that path begins right now. Part 2. The first discipline. Guard the gates of the mind. The war does not begin in action, it begins in thought. Before any destructive habit forms, before the body moves, before desire grows powerful enough to demand satisfaction, something much smaller appears, an impression, a fleeting image, a subtle suggestion, a quiet whisper inside the mind. This is where the battle is truly fought. Most people ignore this moment entirely. They allow every thought to enter freely, as though the mind were a city with no gates and no guards. Every impulse walks in without resistance, and once inside, those impulses begin to rule. But we are not careless guardians of the mind. We know something the ancient teachers understood with remarkable clarity. The first line of defense is not strength of body, nor strength of environment. It is strength of attention. The philosopher Epictetus gave a warning that echoes across centuries. Do not say of anything, "I have lost it, but I have returned it." At first glance, this seems unrelated to desire. But look deeper. He was reminding us that nothing external truly belongs to us. Not possessions, not reputation, not pleasure. All of these things exist outside the true seat of our power. Only one thing belongs entirely to us: our judgments, our responses, our inner decisions. Everything begins there. The morning examination. Each morning, before we engage with the world, we must first examine the mind, not casually, not passively, but with the seriousness of someone preparing for battle, because the world we are about to enter is filled with forces designed to capture attention and stimulate desire, images crafted to provoke impulse, messages designed to weaken restraint, endless stimulation aimed at one goal, keeping the mind restless and distracted. But we refuse to surrender our attention so easily. Instead, we ask ourselves a simple question: what kind of mind will I carry into the world today? A distracted one, a reactive one, a mind that jumps toward every passing temptation, or a disciplined one that observes carefully before responding? The Roman thinker Seneca once wrote, "The mind that is anxious about future events is miserable, yet the mind enslaved by impulse suffers an even worse fate. It becomes fragmented, pulled constantly between short-lived pleasures, never steady, never focused, never free." The first Gator imagined the mind as a fortress: strong walls, high towers, watchful guards standing at the gates. Not every visitor is welcome. Some bring wisdom, others bring corruption. The role of the guard is not to destroy every approaching thought. The role of the guard is to examine it, to ask, is this thought useful? Is it honorable? Does it strengthen the mind or weaken it? If the answer is weakness, the gate remains closed. This discipline may sound simple, but in practice, it requires immense awareness, because destructive thoughts rarely announce themselves. Clearly, they often disguise themselves as harmless curiosity, a glance, a brief moment of indulgence, a small exception. But exceptions slowly erode. Discipline, what begins as a single moment of weakness, becomes a pattern, and patterns eventually become character. The power of refusal. There is an extraordinary strength in a simple word. No, not shouted, not dramatic, just a quiet, firm refusal. When the mind offers an image designed to provoke lust, we examine it calmly. Then we ask ourselves, does this thought make me stronger? Does it elevate my character? Does it move me closer to the person I aim to become? If the answer is no, the response is simple. We do not entertain it. We do not analyze it endlessly. We do not negotiate with it. We dismiss it, just as a disciplined guard removes an intruder without hesitation. At first, this may feel difficult because the mind has grown accustomed to indulgence. It expects stimulation, it expects entertainment, it expects obedience. But we are not servants of expectation, we are builders of character. The ancient training of attention The Emperor Marcus Aurelius practiced this discipline every day despite ruling the largest empire on earth. His greatest concern was not external enemies, it was the condition of his own mind. In his private reflections, he reminded himself constantly, you need to avoid certain things. First, aimless action. Second, purposeless thoughts. Notice how precise this warning is. Purposeless thoughts, not just harmful ones. Even thoughts without direction can weaken the mind, because attention is one of the most valuable resources we possess. Where attention goes, energy follows. Where energy flows, habits form, and habits ultimately shape destiny. Lust, as a thief of energy, lust steals something few people recognize. Not just morality, not just discipline, it steals energy, mental clarity, creative force. The same energy that could build a business, create art, develop knowledge, or strengthen the body becomes scattered in endless cycles of temporary pleasure. And after each indulgence, something subtle happens. Motivation decreases, focus weakens, ambition fades. Many people wonder why they feel drained, distracted, or uninspired, yet they rarely examine the habits silently consuming their mental energy. But we do not ignore these patterns. We confront them, because a person who wastes their inner strength cannot build a powerful life. The responsibility of awareness each morning brings responsibility, not the responsibility imposed by society, not the expectations of others. A deeper responsibility, the responsibility to govern our own minds. The modern scholar Donald Robertson explains that the ancient philosophers viewed emotionally mastery as a trainable skill, not a gift, not something reserved for the naturally disciplined, but a skill cultivated through daily practice, through repeated awareness. Through constant examination of our own thinking. This means something profound. Control is possible, freedom is possible, but only for those willing to practice. We refuse passive living. Most people live passively. They react to whatever stimulus appears before them. They allow the world to shape their thoughts, but we refuse that kind of existence. We choose deliberate living. Each thought examined, each impulse questioned, each action chosen with intention. This is not easy, but difficulty is the forge where strength is created. Every time we guard the gate of the mind, something remarkable happens. The will grows stronger, attention becomes sharper, the mind becomes quieter, and in that quiet space, clarity emerges. The quiet victory the world rarely celebrates. These victories, no applause follows the moment you reject a destructive thought. No recognition comes from resisting temptation, but these unseen victories shape the entire structure of a life, because the person who controls their thoughts controls their direction. And direction determines destiny. So today, as the mind produces its endless stream of impressions, we stand watch. Calm, aware, disciplined. We examine every thought carefully, and when desire attempts to take command, we remind ourselves of a simple truth. Not every thought deserves to stay. Some must be dismissed immediately, some must be replaced with better ones, and some must never be allowed inside the gates of the mind again. This is the first discipline. guard the gates, protect the mind, and when the mind becomes strong, the battle against destructive desire becomes far easier to win. Part 3. Starve the desire that weakens you. There is a truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Desire grows when it is fed and weakens when it is denied. This law governs nearly every habit of the human mind, yet few are willing to apply it to their own impulses. Instead, they believe the opposite, that satisfying desire will make it disappear. But experience tells another story. Every indulgence strengthens the craving behind it, every surrender deepens the habit. Every moment of weakness builds the expectation that the next temptation must also be obeyed, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the will becomes fragile. The philosopher Epictetus warned his students about this with direct clarity. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. The destructive urge is one of those things. It arrives uninvited. It appears without permission. But what we do next, that remains entirely within our power. The illusion of satisfaction lust promises relief. It whispers that indulgence will quiet the mind, that satisfying the impulse will remove the disturbance. But this is the oldest deception in human psychology. Indulgence does not remove desire, it strengthens it. It trains the mind to believe that pleasure is the solution to discomfort. And once the mind learns that lesson, it begins to seek pleasure whenever discomfort appears. Stress, seek pleasure. Boredom, seek pleasure. Loneliness, seek pleasure. Soon, the habit spreads into every corner of life. The mind stops solving problems and begins escaping them. But we refuse to live that way, because escape is not strength, and pleasure without discipline is a trap. The strength of restraint is often misunderstood. People think it means repression, suppression, denial of human nature. But restraint is not about rejecting desire, it is about mastering it. The Roman thinker Seneca explained this beautifully. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. Lust is endless craving. It never says enough. It always asks for more stimulation, more excitement, more novelty, and because it cannot be satisfied, it keeps the mind restless. But the disciplined person discovers something extraordinary. When desire is resisted, its power fades, not instantly, not dramatically, but gradually, like a fire losing strength. When no new fuel is added, the fire that consumes energy, every person possesses a limited supply of mental energy each day. Attention, focus, creative force, willpower. These resources determine what we build with our lives. Yet lust consumes them relentlessly. It scatters attention, it fractures concentration, it replaces long-term goals with short bursts of gratification, and the cost becomes visible over time. Ambition weakens, clarity fades, motivation disappears. Many people wonder why they struggle to build meaningful lives, why discipline feels impossible, why their goals remain distant, yet they rarely examine the silent habits draining their strength. But we examine them carefully, because we understand a simple principle: energy must be protected if it is to be directed toward greatness. The training of the will strength does not appear suddenly. It is forged slowly through repeated acts of discipline. Every time we refuse a destructive impulse, the will grows stronger. Every time we resist temptation, the mind becomes more stable. Every time we choose purpose over pleasure, character deepens. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Those words cut through endless excuses. Discipline is not an idea, it is a practice, a daily series of decisions, small choices that accumulate into powerful habits. And one of the most powerful habits is learning to endure desire without obeying it. Learning to sit with the urge when lust appears. The instinct is to escape the discomfort, to silence it immediately. But true discipline teaches us to do something different. We observe the urge, we sit with it, we watch it rise like a wave, and then something remarkable happens. If we do nothing, the wave passes. This is one of the most powerful realizations a person can experience. Urges feel permanent, but they are temporary. They rise, they peak, and then they fade by refusing to feed them. We teach the mind that impulse does not control action. Over time, the mind begins to trust this new pattern, and temptation loses its authority. The hidden power inside desire, but there is another secret hidden inside desire, energy. The same force that fuels lust can also fuel ambition, creativity, and growth. Desire itself is not the enemy. Uncontrolled desire is when disciplined properly. That energy becomes powerful. It sharpens focus. It intensifies determination. It drives long-term goals. Many of history's most disciplined individuals learned to transform this energy rather than waste it. The modern philosopher Ryan Holiday often reminds readers that self-control is not about deprivation, it is about direction. Energy must go somewhere. If it is not directed toward purpose, it will fall into indulgence. The choice before us every moment of temptation presents a choice. Feed the impulse, or starve it. Feeding it offers immediate pleasure but long-term weakness. Starving it requires discipline but creates long-term strength. And every time we choose strength, something inside us changes. Confidence grows, self-respect deepens. Because we begin to see ourselves clearly not as victims of impulse, but as masters of choice. The quiet transformation, this transformation rarely happens overnight. At first, the mind protests. It demands the familiar pleasures it once received freely. But consistency reshapes the mind. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and slowly the intensity of the urges begins to fade. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt irresistible becomes relevant. This is the quiet victory of discipline. No dramatic announcement, no visible celebration, just a calm mind and a stronger will. The path of self-mastery. Remind ourselves each morning. Desire is not the enemy. Slavery to desire is. And freedom is not found in satisfying every impulse. Freedom is found in the ability to say no. The ancient philosophers understood this deeply. They knew that a person who cannot control their desires will eventually be controlled by them. But the person who governs their inner world becomes impossible to enslave. So today we practice restraint, not with bitterness, not with frustration, but with clarity, because every urge we refuse strengthens the mind. Every impulse we starve weakens its hold over us. And with every act of discipline, we move closer to something rare and powerful. A life governed not by impulse, but by wisdom. Part 4. The inner fortress. There is a place within every person that the outside world cannot touch. A place deeper than reputation, deeper than pleasure, deeper even than fear. It is the silent center of the mind, the place where decisions are made. Most people never learn to protect this place. They allow the world to invade it constantly. Every distraction, every impulse, every temptation walks freely through the gates. The result is chaos, a restless mind, a scattered will, a life directed by external forces. But those who pursue discipline understand something profound. The mind must become a fortress, not a prison. A fortress, strong walls, clear boundaries, a center that remains calm while the outside world rages. The Roman emperor, Marcus Aurelius, described this idea with striking clarity when he wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Think about that carefully. A retreat inside the soul, a place untouched by temptation, noise, or distraction. But this inner refuge does not appear automatically. It must be built. And like every fortress, it is constructed through discipline. The world of constant stimulation. Look around for a moment. We live in an age where temptation is everywhere. Images designed to provoke desire, endless entertainment competing for attention, voices constantly telling us to indulge every craving. The modern world profits from distraction. It thrives when the mind is restless, because a restless mind is easy to control. It seeks stimulation constantly. It reacts to every impulse. It loses the ability to sit quietly with itself, and once the mind loses that ability, discipline becomes nearly impossible. But we refuse to surrender our minds to that chaos. We choose stillness instead, returning to the center each morning before the world reaches us. We return to the center of the mind, the place where judgment lives, the place where impulse meets resistance, the place where freedom is born. The philosopher Epictetus reminded his students of a simple but powerful truth. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Temptation will always exist. Desire will always appear. No amount of discipline will remove the existence of these forces, but discipline changes something more important: our response. When the mind becomes strong, temptation no longer creates chaos. It becomes just another passing event, observed, examined, dismissed. The walls of the fortress, strong mind, is built on several foundations: clarity, self-awareness, purpose. Without these, the walls of the fortress remain weak. Clarity allows us to see temptation for what it truly is, a short-lived impulse pretending to be something meaningful. Self-awareness allows us to recognize when the mind begins to drift toward destructive habits. Purpose gives us a direction strong enough to resist distraction. When a person lacks purpose, pleasure becomes the default goal of life. But when a person lives with purpose, pleasure becomes secondary. Energy flows toward creation instead of indulgence, strength. Through solitude, one of the most powerful ways to strengthen the inner fortress is through solitude, moments where the mind sits quietly without stimulation. No noise, no distraction, just observation. At first, this feels uncomfortable. The mind begins to wander. It demands stimulation. It reaches for the habits it has practiced for years. But if we remain patient, something remarkable happens. The mind begins to settle. Thoughts slow down. Clarity returns. The philosopher Seneca understood the value of solitude when he wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." But there is another form of association that is just as important: association with your own mind. Learning to sit with it, learning to observe it, learning to guide it. When temptation strikes, even the strongest fortress will face attacks. Moments when desire arrives suddenly, moments when discipline feels fragile, moments when the mind tries to justify weakness. This is when the training matters most. Instead of reacting immediately, we pause. We take a step back from the impulse. We ask ourselves a simple question: what would the strongest version of myself do right now? Not the most comfortable action, not the easiest path, the strongest one, because every decision either strengthens the fortress or weakens it, and every moment of awareness gives us the chance to reinforce the walls. The calm mind as discipline grows, something unexpected begins to happen. The mind becomes calmer. Temptation still appears, but it no longer creates the same turbulence. Thoughts come and go without capturing attention. Desires rise and fade without demanding obedience. This calmness is not emptiness, it is clarity. The modern Stoic thinker Massimo Pigliucci describes this state as living in accordance with reason rather than impulse, a life guided by reflection instead of reaction. And once the mind learns to operate this way, something powerful becomes possible: real freedom, the freedom of self-mastery. Many people believe freedom means doing whatever they want, following every impulse, satisfying every craving. But that kind of freedom is fragile, because the person ruled by impulse is not truly free. They are controlled by their desires. Real freedom looks different. It is the ability to choose discipline even when pleasure calls. It is the ability to remain calm when temptation appears. It is the ability to govern the mind rather than obey it. This freedom cannot be taken away by the world because it exists entirely within us. The fortress stands each day. We return to this practice, guarding the gates, starving destructive impulses, strengthening the walls of the inner fortress, and slowly, almost invisibly, something changes. The mind becomes stable. The will becomes firm. Temptation loses its power. What once felt like an overwhelming force becomes nothing more than a passing shadow. And from this strength, a new kind of life becomes possible. A life directed by purpose. A life guided by clarity. A life where the mind stands firm no matter what storms appear outside the walls. This is the fourth discipline. Build the inner fortress. Protect the center of the mind. And when the mind becomes unshakable, destructive desire loses its authority. Part V. Transform desire into power. Desire is not weak. It is powerful. It moves the human spirit. It drives action. It fuels ambition. It ignites creation. The same force that can pull a person into indulgence can also raise them toward greatness. The problem is not the existence of desire. The problem is direction. When desire has no discipline, it becomes destructive. When it is guided by purpose, it becomes one of the most powerful forces a human being can possess. Most people never discover this truth. They spend their lives fighting their impulses blindly, believing the only options are indulgence or suppression. But there is a third path: transformation. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of a profound idea in his personal reflections. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Think carefully about those words. The obstacle becomes the path. The very struggle that threatens to weaken us can also become the source of our strength if we learn how to use it. Lust is not merely a temptation, it is raw energy, and energy can be redirected. The misunderstood nature of desire. People believe desire must be destroyed entirely. They see it as a dangerous force that must be suppressed or ignored. But suppression often leads to frustration, and frustration eventually erupts into indulgence. This is why discipline requires something deeper than resistance. It requires understanding. Desire is a signal from the mind and body. It is the expression of energy seeking release. The question is not whether the energy exists. The question is where it will go. If it flows toward temporary pleasure, it weakens the mind. If it flows toward purpose, it strengthens the character. The philosopher Seneca offered a warning that still echoes through time. If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable. Without direction, desire becomes chaos, but when guided by a clear purpose, even powerful impulses can serve something greater. Redirecting the energy. Imagine the energy behind temptation as a river. If left uncontrolled, it floods everything around it. But if directed properly, it becomes a powerful source of movement. The same energy that fuels destructive desire can fuel discipline, ambition, and creativity. History offers countless examples of individuals who learned to redirect their impulses toward meaningful goals. They did not eliminate their inner fire. They refined it. They disciplined it. They transformed it. And through that transformation, they built extraordinary lives. The fire of creation. The human mind thrives when it creates, when it builds, when it solves problems and pursues meaningful goals. But when the mind lacks purpose, it begins searching for stimulation instead. This is why lust becomes so powerful in empty moments. Boredom feeds it. Lack of direction feeds it. A life without challenge feeds it. But a person driven by purpose experiences something different. Energy flows into work, into learning. Into building something meaningful. The modern philosopher Ryan Holiday often emphasizes that discipline is not about punishment, it is about alignment, aligning our actions with our highest values, aligning our energy with our deepest goals. When that alignment exists, destructive impulses lose their attraction, because the mind becomes focused on something far greater, turning restlessness into progress. Temptation often appears during moments of restlessness, when the mind feels unfocused, when energy has nowhere to go. But restlessness itself is not the enemy, it is simply unused power. The person who understands this learns to channel that restlessness into action. When the urge appears, we move, we work, we train the body, we study, we build, because movement redirects the energy that would otherwise fall into indulgence, and every productive action strengthens the mind's association between discipline and reward, training the body, strengthening the mind. Physical discipline plays a powerful role in mastering desire. Exercise. Training. Pushing the body through discomfort. These practices teach the mind something essential. Control. The philosopher Epictetus believed that hardship was not something to avoid, but something that revealed the strength of character. When the body learns to endure effort, the mind becomes stronger as well. Fatigue becomes manageable, discomfort becomes familiar, and the ability to resist impulse grows naturally. This is why many disciplined individuals begin their day with physical effort, not because it is easy, but because it strengthens the will. The growth of self-respect there is another reward hidden inside discipline. Self-respect. Every time we redirect desire toward something meaningful, we reinforce a powerful belief about ourselves. We are capable of control. We are capable of strength. We are capable of building the life we imagine. Self-respect cannot be purchased, cannot be given by others. It is built slowly through action, through moments when the easier path is rejected in favor of the stronger one, and over time, these moments accumulate into something powerful. Confidence born from discipline. The mind begins to change. This practice continues. Something remarkable begins to happen. The mind itself transforms. Temptations that once felt overwhelming begin to lose their intensity because the mind has learned a new pattern. Energy is no longer directed toward indulgence. It flows toward purpose, toward progress, toward mastery. And as this new pattern strengthens, the inner world becomes calmer, clearer, more stable. The path forward each day presents the same opportunity. Desire appears, energy rises. The question returns, where will this energy go? Toward distraction, toward indulgence, or towards something meaningful? Every decision shapes the answer, and every disciplined choice builds a stronger mind. The power within the force that once threatened to weaken us becomes something entirely different, a source of motivation, a source of focus, a source of relentless drive. What once felt like an enemy becomes an ally, because when desire is guided by discipline, it transforms into something extraordinary, purposeful. Energy and purposeful energy can build a life of remarkable strength. This is the fifth. Discipline. Do not waste desire. Transform it. Direct its energy toward growth, creation, and purpose. And when desire serves purpose instead of pleasure, the path toward mastery becomes unstoppable. Part 6. The warrior of self-control. There comes a moment in every disciplined life when the struggle becomes clear, not as a vague discomfort, not as an occasional temptation, but as a war between impulse and intention, between the easy path and the meaningful one, between the person we are today and the person we are capable of becoming. Most people never fully acknowledge this battle. They drift through life reacting to their urges, surrendering to whatever emotion happens to be strongest in the moment. But those who seek mastery cannot afford that kind of unconscious living. We recognize the conflict, we face it directly, and we train ourselves to win it. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote words that still strike with remarkable force. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This reminder was not meant to create fear. It was meant to sharpen awareness. Life is limited. Time is precious, and a mind consumed by indulgence wastes the very resource that makes greatness possible. The choice of identity. Every act of discipline strengthens a particular Identity. Not the identity we present to the world, the identity we quietly build within ourselves. We begin to see ourselves differently, not as someone struggling with temptation, but as someone who refuses to be ruled by it. Identity is powerful because the mind naturally acts in accordance with the person it believes itself to be. If we see ourselves as weak, we act weakly. If we see ourselves as victims of impulse, we surrender easily. But if we begin to see ourselves as disciplined, aware, and in command of our actions, our behavior begins to follow that belief. This is how transformation begins, through small but consistent acts of self-control. The training of hardness, the path of discipline, is not comfortable. It demands effort. It demands awareness. It demands the willingness to endure moments of tension without escaping into pleasure. The philosopher Epictetus often reminded his students that character is revealed through difficulty, not ease. When everything is comfortable, anyone can appear disciplined. But when temptation appears, when the mind begins to justify indulgence, when the urge feels overwhelming, that is when character reveals itself. And each time we resist, the will becomes stronger. Each time we endure the discomfort of restraint, we train the mind to remain calm under pressure. Just as a warrior trains for battle long before the conflict begins, the disciplined mind prepares itself daily, through awareness, through reflection, through practice. Refusing the path of weakness, less thrives on passivity, on boredom, on a mind that drifts without purpose. But the warrior of self-control refuses passivity. When the mind begins to wander toward destructive thoughts, we redirect it immediately. We move, we act, we focus our attention on something worthy of our energy, because idleness is fertile ground for impulse. Purpose is the antidote. The Roman philosopher Seneca warned that time is the most valuable possession a person has. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. How much time disappears into meaningless indulgence? Hours lost to distraction. Energy drained by habits that build nothing. But when we value our time, we begin to protect it fiercely. We begin to treat our attention as something precious. The strength of awareness is the weapon of the disciplined mind. Temptation relies on unconscious reaction. It thrives when we act without thinking. But the moment we pause, observe, and examine the impulse, something changes. The illusion begins to fade. We see the urge clearly, not as a command, not as an irresistible force, but as a passing signal from the mind. The modern Stoic thinker Massimo Pigliocci explains that much of emotional mastery begins with this simple skill: observing thoughts without immediately obeying them. This distance creates power. It turns reaction into choice, and choice is the foundation of freedom. Building unbreakable, disciplined, is not built through a single heroic act. It is built through repetition, daily. Victories, small moments of resistance, moments that seem insignificant at first, but accumulate into extraordinary strength. Each refusal strengthens the will. Each act of awareness deepens self-control. Each disciplined choice reinforces the identity of someone who governs their own mind. And slowly, something remarkable happens. Temptation begins to lose its authority. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt irresistible becomes optional. The warriors come there. Is a certain calm that appears in a disciplined mind, not the calm of laziness, not the calm of indifference, a deeper calm, the calm of someone who knows they are in control. Impulses may appear, desires may rise, but the mind no longer reacts with panic or urgency. Instead, it observes, it evaluates, and then it chooses. This calmness is not weakness. It is strength refined through discipline. The path few choose. Most people will never walk this path because it demands too much honesty, too much awareness, too much effort. It requires confronting the parts of ourselves that we would rather ignore. But those who choose this path gain something rare: mastery over the self, a mind that cannot be easily manipulated, a will that remains steady even when temptation appears. The quiet power of control. When the mind reaches this level of discipline, something extraordinary becomes visible. Control, not control over other people, not control over external circumstances. Control over the one thing that truly belongs to us, our own actions. And once that control is established, the entire structure of life changes. Goals become achievable. Focus becomes natural. Energy flows toward creation instead of distraction. The final realization: the warrior of self-control understands something that many never discover. The greatest battles in life are fought internally, not on battlefields, not in competition with others, but within the silent space of the mind. And the person who wins those battles gains a level of freedom that cannot be taken away by the world, because the strongest prison is not made of walls. It is made of uncontrolled impulses, and the person who breaks those chains becomes truly powerful. This is the sixth discipline. Train the mind like a warrior. Refuse weakness. Strengthen the will until temptation loses its authority. And when the mind becomes disciplined, the path toward mastery opens before us. Part 7. Becoming unshakable. The final stage of mastery is not the absence of desire. It is not the elimination of impulse. It is not the triumph of will in a single act. It is the transformation of the mind into something unshakable. We have walked the path together. We have observed the thoughts that sought to control us. We have starved the impulses that threatened our strength. We have built the fortress of the mind. We have redirected desire into purpose. We have trained ourselves like warriors of discipline, and now we stand at the threshold of something rare. The calm within the storm life will never become easier. Temptation will continue to appear. The world will continue to distract, provoke, and challenge. But the unshakable mind is no longer fragile. It does not flee from discomfort. It does not bend to impulse. It does not collapse under desire. The philosopher Epictetus reminded us, "No man is free who is not master of himself." This mastery is the ultimate freedom. It allows us to act with purpose, to choose wisely, to move through life unbound by fleeting cravings. The victory of inner strength. Notice this carefully. Victory is not loud. It does not demand recognition. It is silent. It is internal. It is invisible to the outside world. The mind that resists temptation, that governs itself, that channels energy toward creation and growth. This mind wins every day. Every refusal of a destructive thought, every act of discipline, every moment spent strengthening the fortress within. This is how we become unshakable, not by chance, not by magic, but by deliberate, repeated effort. Freedom through discipline. The unshakable person understands a profound truth. Pleasure is fleeting. Impulse is temporary. External circumstances are unpredictable, but the mind is ours. Its focus, its discipline, its strength, these cannot be taken by anyone else. As Marcus Aurelius said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. A mind steeped in discipline, Awareness and purpose becomes a fortress no temptation can breach. A mind governed by reason, not impulse, achieves clarity. A mind that channels desire toward creation, not indulgence, attains freedom. This is the culmination of all we have practiced. The daily practice of mastery becoming unshakable is not a final event. It is not a single act of heroism. It is a daily practice, a moment-by-moment commitment, a choice to remain vigilant, aware, and disciplined. Every morning we return to the mind's gates. Every day we refuse impulses that weaken us. Every action is examined for purpose. Every moment is an opportunity to strengthen the fortress. We become unshakable not because the world changes, but because we have changed. The warrior within this path is not for the faint of heart. It demands courage, patience, and vigilance. It requires a willingness to face the most uncomfortable parts of ourselves, to confront the mind's whispers, the body's cravings, the heart's temptations, and in doing so, we discover something extraordinary, a power that cannot be bought, a strength that cannot be taken, a freedom that cannot be broken. We are no longer at the mercy of fleeting impulses. We are no longer slaves to lust. We are warriors of the mind, guardians of the fortress within, masters of our own will. The final thought, let this be the truth we carry forward. We are not defined by our desires. We are defined by how we respond to them. Every refusal is a brick in the fortress. Every act of discipline is a step toward freedom. Every moment of awareness is a victory over chaos. And when all of these moments accumulate, we become unshakable. We become strong not just in body, but in mind. We become free not just in circumstance, but in spirit. A life redeemed, the journey does not end. The temptations of the world will never cease, but neither will our vigilance, neither will our strength, neither will our purpose. We walk forward together, calm in the storm, steady against desire, firm in our discipline, and in that steadiness, we discover something eternal, a life ruled by reason, fortified by and free from the tyranny of fleeting impulses. We have ended lust not through force, but through transformation. We have conquered the inner enemy, not through avoidance, but through mastery. We have become unshakable, and from this place, nothing in the world can move us.